The wine glass slipped from my hand, but I barely heard it shatter. My mother stood at the head of the dining table, her face flushed from champagne and anger, pointing directly at me. "Maya has been a drain on this family since the day she was born," she announced to 20 relatives gathered for Thanksgiving dinner. "A mistake I've had to carry for 32 years. The room fell silent. Then my brother Brandon laughed, breaking the tension. "Come on, Mom's just being honest. Some of us contribute, and some of us just take." A few cousins chuckled nervously. My aunt looked down at her plate. My uncle cleared his throat. No one defended me. Not one person. I sat frozen, feeling every eye on me, feeling smaller and smaller until I wanted to disappear completely. My mother continued talking, listing my failures, my shortcomings, everything she resented about me. The words blurred together. I stood up quietly, grabbed my coat, and walked out. No one followed. No one called my name. In my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, I remembered something. Something they didn't know. Something that would change everything. I had been paying for everything. My name is Maya Torres. I'm 32 years old, originally from Phoenix, Arizona. If you want to hear more stories like this one, please subscribe to this channel. You won't believe what happened next. For 10 years, I had been the invisible safety net beneath my family. My father died when I was 22, leaving behind a trust fund specifically designated for the house mortgage. He made me the trustee because I was studying finance and he trusted my judgment. The trust was supposed to cover the payments until my mother turned 65. Then she would inherit everything outright. Dad wanted to make sure she never worried about losing the house. But here's what nobody knew. The trust ran out after 5 years. Dad's investments hadn't performed as well as expected. The money simply wasn't enough. I discovered this when I was 27. I sat in the lawyer's office, staring at the numbers, realizing my mother would lose the house in 6 months if someone didn't step in. So I did. I paid the mortgage myself, month after month, year after year. I funneled the money through the trust account, so she would never know. I wanted her to feel secure, to feel like Dad was still taking care of her. I never told her. I never told anyone. That night after the dinner, I sat at my laptop, staring at the trust account login screen.
Everything was about to change.
I didn't act out of anger. That's important to understand. I was hurt, yes, but I wasn't interested in revenge. I wanted clarity and boundaries. I contacted the estate attorney, Mr. Sullivan, first thing Monday morning. I explained that due to personal circumstances, I needed to resign as trustee effective immediately. It was my legal right. "Are you certain?" he asked, concern in his voice. "This will suspend all transfers during the transition period." "I'm certain," I replied. He prepared the paperwork. I signed everything properly, dated and witnessed. I submitted my resignation through official channels. Everything was documented. Everything was legal. The system automatically generated notifications to all parties, the bank, the mortgage company, and my mother as the beneficiary. I wasn't cutting her off maliciously. I was simply stepping away from a role that had consumed me for a decade. A role she didn't even know I was filling. As I clicked submit on the final form, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction. Not anger. Relief. That afternoon, the bank's automated system sent out the notification. It would reach my mother's email by morning. I closed my laptop and waited. My phone rang at 7:30 the next morning. I was making coffee when I saw Brandon's name flash across the screen. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. And again. Meanwhile, my mother was waking up to an email from First National Bank. Account transfer suspended. Trustee resignation pending review. She opened her mortgage portal and saw the red warning banner. Payment overdue. 30-day notice. I imagined her sitting at the kitchen table, reading and rereading the words, not understanding. The mortgage had always been paid automatically. For 15 years, she'd never worried about it. She called Brandon immediately. "There must be a mistake," he told her, his voice confident. "Banks mess up all the time. I'll call them and straighten it out." He called the bank. They explained the situation professionally. The trustee had resigned, the account was frozen during the transition period, and no further automatic payments would process until a new trustee was appointed. Who was the trustee? Brandon demanded. That information is confidential, sir. My mother tried calling the bank herself. She got the same polite runaround. Then, finally, she called me. Her name appeared on my screen. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Maya? Her voice was tight, controlled. Not apologetic. Just stressed. Hi, Mom. I need to ask you something about your father's trust. The bank says there's been some kind of change. Do you know anything about this? I kept my voice calm and professional. Yes, I resigned as trustee. There's an audit happening, and I felt it was time to step away from managing the account. Silence stretched between us. What do you mean, resigned? Her voice rose slightly. What do you mean, managing? I was the trustee, Mom. Dad appointed me when he set up the trust. I've been managing it since he passed, but I thought it was automatic. I thought the lawyer handled everything. No, I said simply. I handled everything. Another long pause. Can you undo this? I got a notice about the mortgage payment. The resignation is already processed. You'll need to work with Mr. Sullivan to appoint a new trustee. Maya, please. I have to go, Mom. I have a meeting. I hung up gently and turned off my phone. Brandon called an emergency family meeting that evening. I knew this because my aunt texted me. Your mom is freaking out. What's going on? I didn't respond. At my mother's house, she sat at the dining table surrounded by Brandon, my uncle, and a few close relatives. Papers were scattered everywhere. Bank statements, mortgage documents, trust fund records. We might have to sell the house, my mother said, her voice breaking. I don't understand what happened. The trust was supposed to cover everything. Brandon was pacing, angry. That bank is incompetent. They can't just freeze accounts like that. My uncle, who worked in accounting, was quietly reviewing the statements. His brow furrowed. Hold on, he said slowly. When did Dad's trust actually run out? My mother looked up. What do you mean? It hasn't run out. According to this, the original fund was depleted 7 years ago. Everyone stared at the document. That can't be right, Brandon insisted. The mortgage has been paid every month. My uncle nodded slowly. Yes, but not from the trust. Someone else has been making the payments. The room went silent. Wait, my aunt said quietly. Who's been paying? My uncle started pulling out old statements, laying them across the table. My mother watched, her face pale. Look at this, he said, pointing. The trust account shows regular deposits, but they're not from the original investment. They're transfers from an external source. What external source? Brandon demanded. It doesn't say. But see this reference number? It's been the same for years. My mother grabbed the papers, scanning them with trembling hands. There, in small print on every monthly statement, was a note. Transfer authorized by M. Torres, trustee. My name. Quiet. Unremarkable. But they're on every single page. Brandon's face changed as understanding began to dawn. Maya was the trustee, my mother whispered. So? Brandon shot back. She was managing Dad's money. That was her job. My uncle shook his head slowly. No, Brandon. The money was gone. But the payments never stopped. Not once in 10 years. The implication hung heavy in the air. My aunt covered her mouth. Oh my God. Brandon grabbed his phone and started scrolling through banking apps. That's impossible. Maya doesn't have that kind of money. But my mother was staring at the statements, tears forming in her eyes. Finally, she understood. The next morning, Brandon showed up at my apartment. I watched through the window as he parked and checked his reflection in the car mirror, composing his expression into something resembling concern. I opened the door before he could knock. Maya, he said, attempting a warm smile. Can we talk? I stepped aside and let him in. He sat on my couch, looking around at my modest but comfortable apartment. I could see him calculating, reassessing. I heard about the trust situation, he began carefully. That must have been stressful for you, managing all that. I agreed. Mom is really worried about the house. You know how much it means to her. I nodded but said nothing. He shifted uncomfortably. Look, I know we haven't always been close, but you're still my sister. If there's anything I can do to help resolve this situation, help how? Well, if you could maybe talk to the bank, explain that the resignation was premature. Just until we figure things out. I looked at him steadily. I'll think about it. His face brightened. Really? I said I'll think about it. He left looking hopeful. I knew he would report back to our mother that I was coming around. But I wasn't coming around. I was organizing my defense. I spent the next 3 days gathering documentation. Every bank statement, every transfer receipt, every email I'd sent to Mr. Sullivan over the years. I organized them chronologically in labeled folders. The paper trail was immaculate. I had been meticulous from the beginning, keeping records of everything. I had emails detailing my decisions, my reasoning, my consultations with financial advisors. I found letters I'd written but never sent to my mother, explaining the situation. I drafted them during particularly hard months when the mortgage payment had strained my budget. But I'd always stopped myself from sending them, choosing silence instead. I calculated the total, $312,000 over 10 years. Some months I'd paid only the mortgage. Other months I'd covered property taxes, insurance, emergency repairs. I pulled out my old journals, where I'd written about missed vacations, delayed career moves, relationships I'd sacrificed because I couldn't afford to fully invest in my own life. Everything was documented. Everything was clean. Everything was legal. I scheduled an appointment with Mr. Sullivan for the following Monday. As I closed the last folder, I realized something. I wasn't preparing for a battle. I was preparing for the truth. And the truth had been buried long enough. Mr. Sullivan's office smelled like old books and coffee. He sat across from me, reading through my documentation with growing astonishment. Maya, he said finally, looking up. I had no idea the extent of your personal investment. I didn't want anyone to know. He pulled out his calculator and started adding figures. When he finished, he sat back heavily in his chair. By my conservative estimate, you've personally contributed just over $300,000 to preserve your mother's home. The original trust contributed approximately $200,000 before depletion. Your brother and extended family have contributed. He paused, checking his notes. Nothing. The number hung in the air between us. This is extraordinary, he continued. You've essentially provided your mother with a second mortgage, interest-free, without her knowledge or consent. I did it out of love, I said quietly. I understand. But Maya, you've sacrificed an enormous amount of your own financial future. This money could have been your house, your retirement, your children's education. I knew. I'd known for years. He leaned forward. The question now is, do you want them to know? I can release this information to the family as part of the trust dissolution, or I can keep it confidential. I thought about my mother's face at that dinner. Her words. The laughter. I want them to know, I said. Mr. Sullivan drafted a formal letter to all trust beneficiaries and interested parties. It didn't editorialize. It simply stated facts. The trust history, the depletion date, the subsequent funding source, and the total amount contributed. He sent it to the bank, to my mother, and to my uncle as the family's financial point person. Within hours, my phone started ringing. First my aunt, then cousins, then family friends. I didn't answer, but my aunt left a voicemail, her voice thick with tears. Maya, honey, I just got off the phone with your uncle. I had no idea. I'm so sorry for what your mother said. I'm so sorry I didn't speak up. Please call me back. At my mother's house, the phone was ringing off the hook. Relatives were calling, asking questions, demanding explanations. The narrative my mother had carefully constructed, the narrative where she was the struggling widow, where Brandon was the responsible son, where I was the disappointing daughter, was crumbling. My uncle called Brandon. Did you know Maya was paying the mortgage? That's ridiculous, Brandon sputtered. She's making this up. The bank confirmed it. The lawyer confirmed it. There are 10 years of statements. Brandon went silent. My mother sat alone in her kitchen, The lawyer's letter spread out before her, realizing what she had done, what she had said, who she had destroyed. The family barbecue that weekend was tense. My mother had tried to cancel it, but my uncle insisted they needed to talk. I wasn't invited, but I heard about it from my aunt. People brought their own copies of the lawyer's letter. They compared documents, traced the payment history, verified the numbers. Slowly, carefully, they reconstructed the truth. She never said anything, my aunt murmured. Not once in 10 years. That's Maya, my uncle said quietly. She's always been like that.
Quiet.
Helpful. Never asking for credit. Brandon tried to redirect the conversation. Okay, so Maya paid some bills. That doesn't mean Mom was wrong about everything else. $300,000 isn't some bills. My uncle shot back. That's a mortgage. That's a life. My mother sat silently, accepting the looks of confusion and disappointment from relatives who had laughed at her cruel words just days before. Someone asked the question she'd been dreading. If Maya was paying for everything, what exactly were you contributing? She had no answer. People started looking at me differently, my aunt told me later. They started remembering the Thanksgivings where I'd quietly covered the grocery costs. The Christmases where presents appeared without anyone asking where they came from. The family emergencies where money materialized just when it was needed. They started seeing me. My mother called me that evening. Her voice was defensive, hard. Maya, people are saying terrible things about me because of this situation. What situation? I asked calmly. You know what I mean. This business with the mortgage. You're making it seem like I knew nothing, like I was taking advantage. You didn't know, I said. That's true. Exactly. So, why are you making me look bad? I'm not making you look any particular way, Mom. I'm just telling the truth. The truth. Her voice rose. The truth is you're manipulating everyone with numbers and documents, making yourself look like some kind of martyr. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar ache of trying to reason with her. Mom, I paid your mortgage for 10 years. That's not manipulation. That's a fact. You never told me. How was I supposed to know? Would it have mattered? Would you have been kinder? Would you have defended me at that dinner? Silence. I thought so, I said quietly. You're making this worse than it needs to be, she insisted. If you would just talk to people, explain that it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. You called me a drain and a mistake in front of everyone I love. I hung up. The next day, she received an official statement from the bank, confirming every detail. At my cousin's birthday party, the following month, I showed up. My mother hadn't expected me. I watched her face tighten when I walked in. I brought a gift, smiled politely, and sat with my aunt and uncle. I didn't make a speech. I didn't confront anyone. I just existed in the space. But the atmosphere had changed. Relatives approached me with new respect. They asked about my job, my life, my plans. They listened when I spoke. My mother watched from across the room, isolated. People were polite to her, but the warmth was gone. They knew what she'd said. They knew what I'd done. The comparison was damning. Brandon tried to run interference, telling jokes, playing the charming son. But people excused themselves quickly from conversations with him. At one point, my teenage cousin approached me. Is it true you paid Grandma's mortgage? Yes, I said simply. For 10 years. Yes. She looked at me with something like, awe. That's like superhero stuff. I smiled. Not really. I just did what needed to be done. As the party wound down, I heard my uncle talking to another relative near the kitchen. Diane has been lying to us for years, pretending she had everything under control. Meanwhile, Maya was holding everything together. Everyone was looking at me differently now. And they were looking at my mother differently too. 2 weeks later, my mother's world collapsed further. The bank called about irregularities in the loan paperwork. It turned out Brandon had taken out a second mortgage on the house without telling her. He'd forged her signature, used the house as collateral for his failed business ventures. The debt totaled $80,000, and it was now in default. My mother called me, hysteric. Did you know about this? No, I said truthfully. I only managed the primary mortgage. He's ruined everything. The house is going to be foreclosed. I listened to her panic, feeling oddly detached. This was the same woman who had called me worthless. The same woman who had laughed when Brandon mocked me. What are you going to do? I asked. I don't know. Can you help? Help how? Can you pay it? Just like you paid the mortgage? I'll pay you back, I promise. I took a deep breath.
No, Mom.
I can't. But you have money. You paid for 10 years. I had money. I spent it all keeping you in that house. I don't have $80,000 lying around. She started crying. Real, desperate crying. Please, Maya. I know I was wrong. I know I said terrible things. But I'm begging you. I need to go, I said and ended the call. That evening, I met with Mr. Sullivan again. He had more news, and none of it was good for my mother. I reviewed your mother's will during the estate audit, he said carefully. Are you aware that she revised it 3 years ago?
No.
He slid a document across the desk. I read it slowly, feeling my stomach sink. She had left the house entirely to Brandon. She had left me $5,000 and her collection of costume jewelry. The will specifically noted that Brandon would inherit in recognition of his constant support and dedication to family. The date was important. She changed it right after I'd helped her through a health scare, paying for treatments her insurance wouldn't cover. She assumed you'd always provide, Mr. Sullivan said quietly. She took your support for granted and rewarded the son who gave her nothing but took everything. I stared at the document, feeling something break inside me. Can I contest this? I asked. You can. You have documentation of significant financial contribution to the estate. But Maya, I need to ask, do you want to fight for a house that cost you everything? I thought about it. Did I want that house? Did I want anything from her anymore? I want to confront her. I said finally. I want her to see what she did. I arrived at my mother's house unannounced, carrying a folder thick with documents. She answered the door looking exhausted, older than I'd ever seen her. Maya, she said, surprised. Come in. I sat at the same dining table where she'd humiliated me. I spread out the papers methodically, every mortgage payment, every property tax bill, every insurance premium. Then I laid out the will. I want you to see something, I said calmly. I want you to understand what you've done. She looked at the documents, her face crumbling. This, I pointed to the payment records, is $300,000 I paid to keep you in this house. I was 27 when I started. I gave up buying my own home. I gave up relationships because I couldn't afford to travel or take time off. I missed opportunities because every spare dollar went here. She was crying now, but I continued. And this, I touched the will, is how you repaid me. You left everything to Brandon, the same Brandon who stole from you. You assumed I'd always be there, always providing, always the responsible one. You never even said thank you. I didn't know, she sobbed. I didn't know about the payments. Would it have mattered? I asked again. At that dinner, did you think I was worthless because I didn't pay your bills? Or did you just not love me? She broke completely then, collapsing into tears. I'm sorry, she gasped. I'm so sorry. Please, Maya. Please forgive me. I looked at her, this woman who had given birth to me, but never really seen me. I don't know if I can, I said honestly. Over the next hour, my mother begged. She promised to change, to make things right, to value me. She said everything people say when they're desperate. I listened without emotion. If you want my help, I said finally, here are my conditions. First, you revise the will. Fair and equal distribution. Second, you attend family therapy with me. No excuses, no cancellations. Third, Brandon pays back what he stole, or he gets nothing from the estate. And fourth, you tell the truth to everyone about what I did. I'll do anything, she promised. I'm not finished, I said. Fifth, you sell this house. She looked shocked. What? But this is my home. This house has cost me everything. It's cost you your honesty and your family's respect. It needs to go. You downsize, you clear the debt, and you learn to live within your means. I won't subsidize this anymore. Maya, please. Those are my terms. Take them or leave them. She stared at me, realizing I meant every word. Before she could answer, Brandon burst through the door. What the hell are you doing? He shouted at me. Mom called me crying. You can't force her to sell. I'm not forcing anything, I said calmly. I'm setting boundaries. Boundaries? You're destroying this family. No, Brandon. I held this family together for a decade. Now I'm letting go. He turned to our mother. Mom, tell her she can't do this. But my mother just sat there, broken and silent. Brandon tried everything over the next few days. He called relatives, spinning stories about my cruelty. He posted vague messages on social media about family betrayal. Then Mr. Sullivan called him in for a meeting. I wasn't there, but my uncle told me what happened. The lawyer laid out the facts, the payment history, the forged mortgage, the will manipulation. He explained clearly and professionally exactly what Brandon had done and what I had done. Your sister has legal grounds to sue for repayment, Mr. Sullivan said. She has grounds to contest the will. She has grounds to press charges for the forged documents. She's choosing not to do any of that. She's simply asking for honesty and boundaries. Brandon tried to bluster.
She's rich.
She can afford to help. Your sister makes $72,000 a year, the lawyer replied. She lived in a small apartment and drove a 15-year-old car, so she could afford your mother's mortgage. Where exactly did you think the money came from? Brandon had no answer. The lawyer continued. Meanwhile, you borrowed against your mother's house without permission, committed fraud, and contributed nothing to her care. If anyone in this family should be ashamed, Mr. Torres, it's you. Brandon left the office in silence. Within days, his entire social circle knew the truth. His fiancée broke off their engagement. His business partners distanced themselves. He had played the victim and lost. At the next family gathering, the dynamic had completely reversed. Relatives openly defended me when my mother tried to excuse her behavior. Diane, you called your daughter a drain while she was literally paying your mortgage, my uncle said bluntly. There's no excuse for that. My aunt added, Maya has been the foundation of this family, and you treated her like garbage. My mother sat alone at the periphery of the party, isolated by her own choices. People were polite but distant. They brought their problems to me now, asked my advice, respected my opinions. She watched it all, realizing what she'd lost. As I was leaving, she followed me to my car. Maya, wait, she called. I turned, keys in hand. Everyone hates me now, she said, tears streaming down her face. My own family won't talk to me. They don't hate you, Mom. They're just disappointed. What's the difference? I considered this. Hate is permanent. Disappointment can heal. But you have to actually change, not just promise to change. I will, she insisted. I'll do everything you asked. Please, just don't give up on me. I looked at this woman who had hurt me so deeply, and I felt something shift. Not forgiveness yet, but maybe the beginning of it. I'll think about it, I said and drove away. 2 days later, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. It was raining, and she stood in my doorway soaked and shivering. I made an appointment with a family therapist, she said. Next Tuesday at 4. Will you come? I looked at her, really looked at her. She'd aged 10 years in the past few weeks. Her eyes were red from crying. She looked small and broken. Why? I asked. Why now? Because I realized something, she said, voice shaking. I resented your quiet strength. You were always so capable, so independent. You never needed me the way Brandon did. And instead of being proud, I punished you for it. That's not fair, I said. I know. Nothing about this has been fair. But I'm trying to understand myself, and I'm trying to make it right. I stepped back and let her in. She sat on my couch, looking around at my simple life. I never asked you about your life, she said quietly. I never asked what you wanted, what you dreamed about. I just assumed you were fine, because you always seemed fine. I wasn't fine, Mom. I was drowning. I was paying your mortgage and smiling through it because I loved you, and you thanked me by calling me a mistake." She covered her face with her hands and wept. I sat beside her, not touching, just present. "Will you come to therapy?" she asked again. I took a deep breath.
Yes.
"But I'm not promising anything beyond that." "That's all I'm asking," she whispered. The mediated family meeting happened 3 weeks later. Mr. Sullivan arranged it, and a professional family counselor moderated. My mother, Brandon, my uncle, my aunt, and I sat in a conference room at the lawyer's office. The counselors set ground rules. Everyone speaks uninterrupted, no blaming language, focus on feelings and facts. Brandon went first, defensive and angry. But the counselor gently redirected him every time he tried to blame others. My aunt spoke about watching the family dynamics for years and feeling powerless to intervene. My uncle talked about my father, about how disappointed he would be in how things had turned out. Then it was my mother's turn. She took a shaky breath and looked directly at me. "Maya, I failed you. I failed you as a mother, as a protector, as a parent. I let my insecurities and my favoritism poison our relationship. I took your strength for granted and your love for weakness. I'm sorry isn't enough, but it's where I have to start." Her voice broke. "You deserved better. You deserved a mother who celebrated you, who saw you, who valued you. Instead, you got me. And I'm so deeply sorry." It was the first real apology I'd ever received from her. Then I spoke. "I need you to know what those 10 years cost me," I began. And I told them everything. I spoke for 20 minutes. I told them about the months I survived on rice and beans so I could make the mortgage payment. About the relationship I ended because I couldn't afford to move in with someone I loved. About the promotion I turned down because it required relocation and I couldn't leave while Mom needed me. I told them about the Christmases where I shopped at thrift stores for my own gifts but bought them nice presents. About the times I smiled through family dinners while calculating whether I could cover an emergency car repair. I told them about the exhaustion, the loneliness, the feeling of being invisible while carrying everything. And through all of it, I said, looking at my mother, "I never asked you for recognition. I just wanted you to love me. But at that dinner, you told me I was a drain. You told me I was a mistake." And everyone laughed. My mother was crying openly. Brandon looked at the floor. "I'm not telling you this to punish you," I continued. "I'm telling you because you need to understand. You need to see what you did. And you need to decide if you're willing to do the hard work of changing." The counselor asked my mother, "Diane, what do you hear Maya saying?" "That I broke her heart," Mom whispered. "That I took everything and gave nothing. That I'm a terrible mother." "I didn't say you were terrible," I corrected. "I said you failed me. There's a difference. Terrible is permanent. Failure means you can still try." She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "I want to try," she said. Over the next 6 months, changes happened slowly, but steadily. My mother put the house on the market. It sold quickly. Too many memories for everyone involved. She moved into a modest condo she could afford on her own. Brandon was required to repay his debt through a structured plan. Most of his inheritance was withheld until he did. The will was revised, equal distribution, transparent, fair. My mother and I attended therapy every week. Some sessions were brutal. She had to confront ugly truths about herself. I had to set boundaries and stick to them. She started working part-time, something she hadn't done in years. She joined a community group. She learned to manage her own finances. I was partially reimbursed from the house sale, not everything, but enough to start my own savings again. I put a down payment on a small house. The family dynamic shifted. Brandon apologized, grudgingly at first, then more genuinely as consequences caught up with him. He got a real job and started paying his debts. But the biggest change was this. I walked away from being the family's safety net. I helped when I chose to, not because I was expected to. I said no without guilt. I prioritized my own life. And slowly, I realized something. I was free. It's been 2 years since that Thanksgiving dinner. My mother and I talk regularly now. The conversations are real, not superficial.
She asks about my life.
She remembers details. She shows up. She doesn't call me for money anymore. She handles her own problems. When she needs help, she asks, and I decide if I can give it. The dynamic is healthier. Brandon and I have a cordial relationship. He respects my boundaries now, mostly because he has no choice. The extended family treats me differently. I'm no longer invisible. I'm valued, respected, heard. Last month, my mother hosted a small dinner party at her condo. As we sat around her table, she raised her glass. "I want to say something," she announced. 2 years ago, I said terrible things about my daughter. I called her a drain. I called her a mistake. She looked at me, eyes glistening. But the truth is, Maya was never a drain. She was the foundation. She held this family together when we were falling apart. And I was too blind to see it.
She started to cry.
"I'm sorry it took me so long to see you, baby. But I see you now. And I'm so proud of who you are." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Thank you," I whispered. As I drove home that night, I thought about everything that had happened. The pain, the betrayal, the long journey to healing. I wasn't a drain. I was the foundation. And once they saw that, everything changed.